This is a Bugatti Divo. Those are words I never thought I would say, because this is a car I never thought I would see, let alone review. This is essentially the ultra-limited high-performance version of the Bugatti Chiron. It has 1,500 horsepower. There are just 40 of these for the entire planet, and it has a value of around $8 million. And today, I'm going to review it. Before I get started, be sure to check out Cars and Bids, which is my new online enthusiast car auction website for cool cars from the modern era. If you're looking to sell or buy a cool modern enthusiast car from the 1980s and up, Cars and Bids is the place. Daily auctions with amazing selection, lots of traffic and bids. Check out Cars and Bids at carsandbids.com. I've borrowed this Divo from a viewer here in South Florida, and let's just get right to it because there's a lot to cover. A few years ago, I reviewed the Bugatti Chiron, which is one of the most impressive, amazing hypercars on the planet. That video has almost 15 million views. Well, the Divo is the even more special, even more high performance, even more rare, even more amazing version of the Chiron. So let's talk basics. Like I said, 1,500 horsepower, which is about the same as the Chiron, and torque is basically the same too, at 1,200 pound-feet. The real difference with the Divo is the track focus of this car. It has about an 80-pound weight saving compared to the Chiron, and it has different styling and cosmetic changes for improved downforce, along with stiffer suspension for better handling. The goal is a much sharper focus on performance trackability compared to luxury like the Chiron. The other big thing about the Divo is just how limited it is. Like I said, 40 units for the entire world, and they're all sold out. Also, while the Chiron starts around $3 million, the Divo's starting price is around $5 million, and that's before options and features and customization, which can take that number much higher. And that's just the sticker price. Because these are so rare, so sought after, the actual value is much higher. Figure around $8 million for a car. A very special car. And today we're gonna find out just how special it is. First, I'm going to take you on a thorough tour of the Divo, and I'm gonna show you all of the quirks and features of one of the rarest, most special, most amazing, most expensive, most exclusive cars on the planet. Then I'm gonna get it out on the road and drive it, which terrifies me, and then I'll give it a Doug score. All right, I'm going to start the quirks and features of the Divo, which is just amazing to me. But anyway, I'm going to start in the back, and I'm going to point out a few items on the Divo that are distinctive from what you'd get in a regular Chiron. And I want to start with the exhaust. You have this center exhaust down here. Now, the Chiron also has a center exhaust, but it's far more muscular looking in the Divo. You have these individual quad pipes, and it just looks so cool. And it sounds pretty amazing too. Take a listen. So the exhaust sounds amazing and looks cool, but there are a lot more differences back here compared to the standard Chiron. Another big one is the wing. Now the Chiron also has a wing, but it's retractable, goes up and down. In the Divo, it's fixed in place, and it's huge, quite a bit larger than the wing in the Chiron to get more downforce, make the car grippier to the ground for better handling and track performance. Also very noticeable back here is this like center mounted wing, this like fin that goes down the middle of the car. Again, this is for aerodynamic purposes, designed to channel air sort of left or right to play with how the air moves around the car. Between that fin and the rear wing, very distinctive from the standard Chiron. And there's a lot more quirks worth pointing out back here. One is the rear diffuser, which is of course gigantic, massive, far larger than what you get in the Chiron, more aggressive, which is kind of the intent with the style of this car, to make it look more aggressive, more muscular, more performance-y. But as far as rear things go, probably the change I like the most is the brake lights. Take a look at them when they're off. You have all these little squares and rectangles kind of jutting out from the back of the car, like 3 feet of little squares. It looks like some art you'd see in a modern house. Well, turn the car on and you can see this is how they light up as a brake light. Some of the little squares turn red and other ones don't, and it just looks neat. When you put on the turn signal, look at this, it's even cooler. The lower half of all these squares turn orange as if it's magic, and then your turn signal is on, and it looks so interesting and so weird and so cool. Definitely one of the coolest and most distinctive taillight designs in the car industry, but the most exciting thing with these taillights happens when you approach the car. Walk up to the car, press the unlock button, and check out the dance these taillights do. The little deep, 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 with each square turning red to become the taillight to sort of acknowledge that you have walked up and unlocked it. And it's the same deal when you lock it and walk away. You can see they all sort of turn off one at a time, and it's a very cool look. This is becoming very popular, these like signature tail light shows when you lock or unlock your car, but this has to be the coolest one I've seen yet. No surprise, it's on the Bugatti Divo. By the way, one other weird quirk to mention back here is the license plate bracket. This is the actual place where you screw in a US-sized license plate, but you can tell it's a lot smaller than a US-sized license plate, but it has the holes for the screws in the right place, and then your license plate just sticks out beyond it. I get the sense Bugatti was upset at having to put this annoying regulatory thing on there. They wanted to have their black squares continue across the entire rear end, so the compromise was they just made the license plate bracket as small as possible. It works, and the plate covers up a little bit of those black squares, but you can see how it looks when the plate is off. Kind of strange. And next up we move on to the side of the Divo, and you can see there are quite a few changes here compared to the CHIRON as well. For one thing, the CHIRON has this arc that goes all the way down to the bottom of the car and the base of the door, and it's a very distinctive line on the outside of the CHIRON. You can see it here. But on the Divo, you can see it's much smaller because below this arc, you have various pieces of bodywork. These are aerodynamic pieces intended to channel air, again, for better downforce. You can see in the front, you have this piece that kind of sticks out from the door and intending to direct the air, and same deal in the back, right in front of the tire. Again, another airflow directional piece. Very different from the regular CHIRON, very much more aggressive, again, intending for better handling, better track performance. And next up, we move on to the front of the Divo. Again, more quirks and features up here, and some very distinctive items from the standard CHIRON. Probably the most noticeable is the headlights. The standard CHIRON, you can see, has this relatively tame set of 4 little light bulbs in a row. Nothing too unusual. This car, the Divo, has this strange light shape in front where it kind of wraps around from the bottom, goes up the side, and then comes back up the top. That is actually the running light, not the headlight. You can see when the car is on, the running light, that part is illuminated as well. Very distinctive and unusual light signature in this car. The actual headlights are concealed. They're next to that piece, but in a very small, thin strip of light you wouldn't otherwise notice. All the focus is intended to be on this strangely shaped, interesting running light. Speaking of that running light, a couple of notable items about it. For one thing, it's also the turn signal. You can see it turns off when I put on the turn signal, takes the place of the turn signal, and then you put the turn signal back off and the running light comes back on. That's pretty standard. A lot of cars have that. But obviously the design of this one is notable. Also notable is the little light show that happens just like in back. When you walk up to the Divo from the front and unlock it, you press the button, you can see the running lights put on a little event for you to make sure you're very excited when you're walking up to your Divo, as if you wouldn't be already. Same deal when you lock it, press the lock button and you can see the running lights do a little dance again to make it just that much more of an event when you're walking away from your multi-million-dollar car. And next up, a few more notable items up front. One is this massive chin spoiler. This is very much more aggressive than the CHIRON, again to signify that this is a more muscular, more track-focused, high-performance car. It's also very low and probably very expensive, and it's the kind of thing that will terrify me that I might break it when I go drive this car. But the chin spoiler is really just a preview at the very front of all the other more aggressive touches on the Divo compared to the CHIRON. You have all sorts of different little inlets and holes for air and aerodynamics all throughout the front end of this car, on the hood, on the fenders, in front of the wheel, various different things to help channel air, again, to provide more downforce to make the car more aggressive and better performing on the racetrack. And speaking of better performance, the goal with the Divo wasn't just to improve downforce to make it faster, it also saves some weight compared to the standard CHIRON. There are all sorts of little areas where weight was taken out. For instance, the wiper blades are carbon fiber, as you can see. A very small weight savings, but a weight savings nonetheless. All of the different areas they pulled out weight combined for about an 80-pound weight weight saving compared to the standard CHIRON. Not a huge amount, but it's something. And to round out the changes that make it more track focused, this car also has stiffer suspension, sportier suspension for better handling prowess, and again, better racetrack capabilities. And next up, a few other important items on the outside of the Divo before I go inside. One is this line that goes up the center of the car. You can see it's in the light blue accent color on this car. It goes all the way up the hood, then the roof, and then it becomes the center line on that fin above the engine and back that I already showed you. That is a pretty cool little touch. You can also see up here that you have the same distinctive Bugatti grille that all Bugattis have. This sort of flat on the bottom, curved on the top, door-shaped grille. Very distinctive to Bugatti, and it's on this car as well, no surprise. One other curious item on the outside is the fuel door, which is on the passenger side, mounted right here. You push it and it opens up. Nothing particularly unusual with that, except that over on the other side you have a second fuel door. This is for adding engine oil if you're running low, and you don't want to mix those two up. Kind of strange, but this is a very different car from the norm. But anyway, next up, let's move on to getting into the Divo. I'm going to start with the key, which is very simple. You can see on one side the blue accent color and the Bugatti logo looks very nice. You flip it over, on the other side you have just two buttons, lock and unlock. That's all you need. Bugatti keeps their key situation quite simple. There's no key in the shape of a car like Pagani. That's all you get. Now, once you've unlocked the car and you've enjoyed the light shows coming from the taillights or the headlights, you walk up here and you can see the door handle. In this case, it's actually pretty obvious. You just stick your hand here in this piece, pull it open, and the door opens. No crazy trick door handle like some supercars, hypercars have. But anyway, let's talk door. You open the door, and with the door open, you can see the absolutely beautiful interior door panel finished in Alcantara in this light blue accent color from the outside, carried into the inside, and it has this gorgeous pattern running through it, and it just looks fantastic. Absolutely love the look of the interior of this door. But before I climb in the Divo, there are a few items I want to cover on the door panel itself. For one thing, at the bottom of the door panel, you can see it has this kind of strange shape to it. It has a weird curve. You might be wondering, what exactly is that? Well, that is one of those aerodynamic lines on the outside of this car, one of the scoops. And with the door closed, you can tell exactly what it is on the outside. So of course, when you open up the car, that same shape is translated to the inside. Looks kind of strange when you're looking at it from the inside. You can't tell what it is, but that's what it's for. There are scoops and aerodynamic additions all over this car. Next up, another door panel quirk worth noting is the power window switches. You can see they're mounted on the door panel like in most cars, but the thing I like is the front half of this little panel is the window switch. The rear half is the lock and unlock buttons, lock on the left and unlock on the right. It's kind of neat how they integrated these buttons and the window switches into one piece. It looks cool, and it's more elegant than having different lock and unlock buttons clutter the beautiful door panel. Interestingly, speaking of the beautiful door panel, the mirror control looks like it's borrowed from other Volkswagen models. It seems crazy to me that such an expensive, purpose-built, special, limited production vehicle has this mirror switch. Nothing unusual or special about it, and I wouldn't be surprised if it really is the same one from the Passat, but that's what they've done. It's something they've carried over. Probably the only thing carried over from other Volkswagen models. And next up, still not climbing in the Divo quite yet. Next, I actually want to move on to the trunk. Now, to access the trunk, which of course is in front, you go into the driver's footwell and pull on this little Alcantara latch. Even the trunk latch is beautiful and finished in the proper color. But anyway, you pull on the latch and the trunk gets to this position, and you come under here, you unlatch it, and it opens up, and you can see it is tremendously small. Just really, really tiny. This is not a car for long trips with lots of people and all their luggage, but Divo owners probably have like 10 other cars for such a purpose. But anyway, small trunk up here. You do have one very cool thing, this little plaque in the trunk that specifically says Divo 1 of 40. So each time you open your trunk, you're reminded you're not just driving a special car, you're driving a really special car. Not sure why the plaque is in the trunk, but nonetheless, it's cool. And by the way, the other label I love in this trunk is the warning label at the front that says, warning, temperature inside the trunk may exceed 122 degrees Fahrenheit. Just fair warning, you might not want to put anything heat sensitive up here because it might get hot. Just another reminder of how this isn't exactly the most practical car. Small trunk, and it gets very warm, so plan accordingly. But anyway, back to climbing in. Now, you open the door to the Divo, and one of the things you immediately realize if you spent time in other Bugatti models, and Divo owners will have, is that on the floor next to the driver's seat, there's no place to put the top speed key. The key you get with your CHIRON or your Veyron that unlocks your capacity to go as fast as possible. That's because the Divo doesn't have a top speed key. Top speed is not the point of the Divo. It's intended for performance, handling, track use, and not all-out speed. So that whole top speed key stuff is just gone. Now, another thing you'll notice when you climb into the Divo is when you go to adjust the seat, there are seat controls here. The backrest can be moved forward, the seat can be moved up or down, but if you want to move the seat itself forward, well, that's a lever under the seat. You're moving a manual lever and then sliding your weight like in some base model Nissan Sentra type vehicle. Now, Bugatti would argue they did this to save weight. Bugatti would say, well, a manual seat weighs less than a power operated seat, so of course we went with manual for our track focused Divo. But my response would be, but it already goes power in 2 other places. Why not just have power operated forward and backward? It seems so ridiculous. It's like you're trying to convince people, look at all the weight we're saving. It's a manual seat, see? But I will say, to Bugatti's credit, they haven't just saved a little bit of weight by removing a motor from the seats. They've taken out weight in a lot of other places. I've already shown you a few. Another example, the sound system is actually later in the Divo than it is in the CHIRON. And probably most noticeably, this interior uses a lot lighter materials. A CHIRON is full of leather and aluminum and luxury stuff. This car is all about carbon fiber, Alcantara, everything to save weight in here. So there are various different spots where weight has been saved all throughout the car, including the ridiculous manual seat. And indeed, if you look through this interior, carbon fiber is absolutely the name of the game in here. The entire upper dashboard is all carbon fiber, and that same carbon fiber panel just sort of comes into the center to the control stack area, and then into the entire center console, just giant pieces of carbon fiber, emphasizing the sportiness of this car versus the luxury of the CHIRON. Now, next up, also notable in this interior, is the ambient light strip, basically, which goes throughout the entire center of this cabin. You can see, starting on the top, this is one giant ambient light going all the way down behind, between the seats and into the center console. And you can see with this little switch, I can turn it on or off just like a dome light. And indeed, in this car, this is the dome light. When you open up a door, this ambient light strip turns on. When you close the door, it turns off, and it's just a really cool touch, and it mimics that strip on the outside of the car I already showed you going down the whole center. Well, you have that inside too, and it lights up. Pretty cool. Now, it's also worth noting that ambient light strip splits the interior into 2 different sides, obviously left and right, which is important because the 2 sides are different colored. You can see the driver's side is all light blue, like on the outside of the car. Over on the passenger side, it's all dark blue. It's completely different. The seats are different color, the dashboard is different color, even the sun visors are different colored from left to right. That is a really cool touch. You very rarely see cars with asymmetrical interiors, but this Divo has that. And when you order one of these, you can personalize it to be whatever you want. And that's one of the personalizations that the owner of this car has chosen. But anyway, next up we move on to starting the Divo. And to do that, you actually have to take the key out of your pocket and place it into this little rectangular hole on the dashboard, which is very unusual for a modern car. Usually they have proximity keys. You can just press the starter button and go, but not here. You first push the key in the dashboard, then you press this button on the steering wheel marked engine, which looks very official, very serious. You push that and the engine roars, and it is quite incredible. Now, as you can imagine, that's not the only interesting button on the steering wheel. Over on the left side, you have a similar red circle. That's not a button, actually. It's a dial, and it controls the various drive modes. If you switch it to the right, you go into Autobahn mode, which is for higher speed travel, not around your neighborhood. You want to go fast, you go into that. If you switch it to the very bottom, that puts it into its fullest race mode for its highest performance. The car goes lower, the suspension tightens up, and it's designed for track use. Obviously, as you can tell, it defaults to this EB position. This is just normal. I guess a regular car would call it comfort mode. If you have it in that, you're just in your standard drive mode position. Now, there's one other thing this dial can do worth mentioning. If you twist it to the left, that's the axle lifter system. You do that and the front of the car raises up, as you can see it's happening right now, and that allows you to clear any potentially hazardous curbs or driveways or whatever, so you don't scrape the front of your car. And the Divo, that is especially nice to have because of that very aggressive front chin spoiler I showed you earlier. It just makes you a little less likely to damage it on a driveway. And by the way, one other notable button on the steering wheel is in the center, not the horn, but below that you have a button marked LC. That stands for launch control. You press that to activate the Divo's launch control, which I can only imagine is an unbelievable feeling of acceleration you can't get pretty much anywhere else. Now, next up, another noticeable item. When you climb inside this car, one of the first things you notice is that there is no large screen in the center of this interior like there is in pretty much every other modern car today. That is intentional. Bugatti wanted this car to be timeless, to age well, and so they didn't want to put in a screen that was modern in 2020, but in 2050, when this is still a very special car, people look at the screen and they just laugh at how outdated and stupid it looks compared to the latest technology of the time. So this car does not have any large screen situation. So then you may be wondering, well, how do you adjust anything in this interior? How do you control all the features that modern cars have? Well, there's no large screen in here, but there are discrete, tiny screens throughout this interior, starting in the center. You see these 4 circles in the center of the dashboard? These are your climate controls. And there's a little dial around each circle that allows you to adjust a different thing with the climate controls. The upper one lets you position where the air is coming out, for example. The next one lets you configure the fan speed, or if you push this button, you can put it into auto mode. And below that, you can adjust the temperature, the climate control temperature inside the car. And below that, you can put on your heated seat. And if you press this little arrow button, you can switch which seat you're controlling. So push it, now you're controlling the driver's seat, turn the dial, and the heated seat is on. And of course, you can do the same thing over on the passenger side. So no giant screen for the climate controls, but little ones that will probably age a lot better. And next up, a little Easter egg for you with these controls. If you press the little arrow button on the heated seat control and hold it down, you can see all of the other climate control displays just changed. And now they're showing your horsepower, your current speed, your engine speed, your RPMs, a couple of different pieces of vehicle information are now right in the center where your climate controls were. Obviously, if you press that little arrow button again, these dials go back to being climate controls. So they have a dual purpose, and it's sort of hidden. You wouldn't necessarily find out about it, but you can change it from climate controls to vehicle info with the push of a button. Another way they saved having to put a screen in the center. And next up, still in this vicinity, let's discuss the gear lever, which is at the bottom of the center control stack and quite strange. First off, when you look at it, you can tell this is going to be weird. There's going to be some strange stuff to it, and indeed that is true. You get in the car and you push the gear lever to the right and you're in drive, but it doesn't stay on the right. It sort of pops back to a central position, which is always the position it's in regardless of what gear you're in. If you push the gear lever to the left, then you're in neutral, but again it pops back to that central position. If you push it to the left and pull it down, then you're in reverse, and again pops back to the center position. Now, next weird gear lever thing, let's say you're in drive, you want to go into manual mode, you just pull the gear lever down and you've just downshifted, or you push it up and you've upshifted and now you're in manual mode. You don't have to do anything else. Of course, you can also pull the shift pedals and do the same thing, but you can do it on the gear lever as well. Finally, if you want to go into park, you follow the instructions at the top of this button on the gear lever. It says press to park. You press it and then you're in park. It's actually straightforward and you would get used to it, but it's kind of strange compared to most regular car gear levers. And next up, speaking of this car's rather unusual and interesting and quirky controls, you will notice there is no radio control in the center control stack. None. No control for the radio, the stereo, the Bluetooth, whatever. This car has all of that stuff, but you don't control it in the center stack. The only radio control in this area is right below the gear lever. There is a power button. You can use that to turn the radio on or off, but that's it. They didn't want to clutter up the center of this interior with radio controls, so they're just not here. Instead, to control the radio, there is another discrete screen. This one is in the driver's gauge cluster. To the right of the center display, which is your speedometer, the driver can use this screen to control all sorts of various different vehicle functions, including the navigation system, the radio, the phone that's connected via Bluetooth to the car, all that stuff. It's not in the center. It's not accessible to the passenger because they just didn't want to clutter up this interior with screens. Now actually in the gauge cluster you have two separate screens. You have one on the left of the center dial, and then you have one over on the right as I was just showing you. The one on the right is by far the most important. Like I said, radio navigation, phone, but it also controls a lot more than that. There are some rather unusual settings in this car. For instance, you can change the octane rating that this car is running on. You can see there are two options, 93 and 91. I guess the theory here is you're driving this car somewhere that doesn't have 93 octane gas, which is what it's rated for. You can tell the car to switch to 91 mode. It probably won't quite make as much power, but then it won't damage the engine, which is obviously important. Next up, another unusual item in this screen is something called stance mode. You can press that and the car will go into stance mode. Now I have to admit, this is a very valuable car. I'm a little afraid of what will happen if I push that, so I'm not going to. But there is a stance mode, and maybe someone who has a Divo who's more braver than me can try it out. Next up, another cool function of this screen, you can use it to change what shows up on the climate screen when you're not looking at the climate control. So when you press that little heated seat left-right button and it switches to the horsepower and the miles per hour and all that, you can actually adjust it to show various different things depending on what you want to see the most. You can even have it show fuel economy if you want to see that in these center climate screens when you're not in climate mode. So those little screens don't just show the climate controls and like the speed, they're configurable. They can show even more than that. Again, a good way to get information into the center of this car without resorting to a large screen that'll look outdated someday. Next up, another interesting item in this right screen is your tire pressure display. A lot of cars have this, but this is a very precise one. It shows your tire pressures down to the 10th, to a decimal digit, and it tells you what they should be, what the acceptable correct number is. This is a very serious display, but it's an important one. In a car that goes over 200 miles an hour, you really want to make sure your tire pressures are exactly correct. Anyway, moving over to the left screen on the left side of the gauge cluster, this one nowhere near as configurable. It pretty much just shows the basics. It shows your RPM, the amount of horsepower that you're using, your fuel level, all that sort of stuff, what you'd typically expect in a gauge cluster. And finally, of course, right in the center, that's your speedometer. This car is a lot about speed. Speed is very important. It's tremendously fast, and so the speedometer, front and center and huge, and it's an old school analog style gauge, you will always know how fast you're going. And next up, a few more interesting and notable interior quirks and features with this car. For one thing, you have a storage compartment mounted under the center control stack. You can see it's here leather lined and stitched on the bottom, where you can stick some smaller items if you want them accessible but stored in the interior. Interestingly, you also have a glove box in here. You push a little button over on the passenger side of the dashboard, the glove box opens up. It's not huge, but it exists. A little bit more storage in here than you might expect, a little bit more practical than you might think. And on that same vein, you also have coat hooks in here. You can see behind the passenger seat, open this up, this is a coat hook if you want to bring your dry cleaning with you in your Divo. Same deal behind the driver's seat, you also have a coat hook here. So there are two coat hooks and two rather large storage areas in here. One other interesting interior item, in the rear view mirror, oval shaped, you look into it and you can see the rear window is bisected by this giant LED light strip that I showed you before. So you have like a left rear window and a right rear window. You don't just have easy visibility out the back. Kind of interesting and unusual. You don't see that in a lot of cars. And next up, also in this vicinity, sort of behind the seats, you can see over on the passenger side of the seat on the headrest, there's a strange image there. That's an elephant. You may be wondering, what does an elephant have to do with a car like this, with Bugatti, with Divo? Well, it's a historic Bugatti image. Back in the day, the Bugatti family was just as famous for their sculptures as they were for their cars. And the elephant sculpture was one of their most famous, and they used it as a logo on some of their cars years and years ago, decades. And so if you want to bring a little Bugatti history into your new Bugatti, you can get an elephant logo like this one that recalls the old school Bugatti models from like the 20s and 30s. This elephant logo is only on the passenger side. You can see over on the driver's side it says Divo. So you have some history and some modern, which looks cool. And finally, moving back outside the Divo and back to the rear, I want to talk about the engine. Now, you can't get back here. There's no panel that opens up. That is left for trained Bugatti technicians. But you can see some of it and it looks cool. Like I said, 1,500 horsepower, 1,200 pound-feet of torque, unbelievable unbelievable numbers. Those aren't really changed from the regular CHIRON, but all the other adjustments to this car make it faster around a track. And I love looking at the engine from the back, and you can see on one side 1500 and the Bugatti logo. On the other side, W16 and another Bugatti logo. Just in case there was any question, you look at this engine from the back, from the outside, there won't be a question anymore. I also just love the Bugatti script on either side, left and right. It just looks so cool back here. Even though you can't actually access or see the engine, it looks fantastic to look from the outside. Now, speaking of the engine, I want to talk performance for a second. I mentioned this car has all sorts of different aerodynamic changes to improve downforce. And indeed, at its top speed, it's making 90 pounds more downforce than a regular CHIRON, which keeps it glued to the ground, better for handling around a racetrack. But there's a drawback to that. All of these wings and aero bits, they create drag. And as a result, the Divo's top speed is significantly lower than the regular CHIRON. The Divo can only do 236 miles an hour compared to over 300 for the CHIRON. But top speed isn't really the point of the Divo. Like I mentioned, this is the handling, the track-focused Bugatti, and so it's not intended for flat-out top speed, but instead for performance around a racetrack, and it is considerably improved in that application. Bugatti says it corners faster, it can pull more lateral Gs side to side than a regular CHIRON, thanks to the added downforce, the aero updates. And Bugatti says it's 8 seconds faster around their Nardo test track than a regular CHIRON, even though it has no more power, just because of the weight reduction, the better suspension, and the aero changes. So this is a faster car on a track, whereas the CHIRON is the faster car on a straight line. And of course, this one far more limited, far more special, with only 40 units for the world. Worth noting, however, the 0 to 60 time for this car is unchanged compared to the CHIRON. It's still something like 2.4 seconds, absolutely ballistically insane acceleration, making this one of the fastest accelerating cars ever. It's really impressive. And so those are the quirks and features of the Bugatti Divo. Now it's time to get it out on the road. I'm terrified, and see how it drives. All right, driving the Divo. The first thing that hits your mind, I haven't driven a really crazy hypercar in a few months for my channel, and the first thing that hits you is it's just terrifying. I'm so nervous driving this car. It is so valuable, but also the rarity factor is huge here. You know, I drive a lot of valuable cars. Some of them are very replaceable. Even my Ford GT, there's thousands of those. If you crash it, you can get another one. Insurance will pay. This car, this is it. There's 40 of these. They're done making them. They're not building you another Divo. So you crash this and you're part of history. You're the guy that crashed the Divo. First thing I noticed just driving, as was true with the CHIRON, this car is far more comfortable and reasonable than most of the hypercars. Thinking back on driving the Koenigsegg and even the Pagani, they're a lot. There's a lot of sound. There's a lot of roughness to the ride. This car, just instantly you can tell, just there's a lot more engineering, there's a lot more luxury, there's a lot more comfort that has gone into creating this car. And in keeping with that, one other crazy thing about it is just how incredibly quiet it is in this car. You can't hear a thing. I've always said the CHIRON is like a Bentley, but also a hypercar. And that's just to me, that's the coolest thing about it. And this carries that on to some extent. And of course, it's just so fast. It is just unbelievably fast. Even a half throttle, you just feel your eyes getting sucked into the back of your head. It's a jet engine. And that's another thing I've always loved about the Bentley W12 engine, and then this engine as well, is just, it doesn't feel as immediate or as boy racer hardcore as like a Koenigsegg. You feel like a jet taking off, and it just feels cool. The immediacy of that power delivery is insane, but it does it without the drama of like you think you're going to be killed because the engine is going to explode. It's just a tremendously well-engineered car. You understand why the car is as expensive as it is when you sit in here and you feel that it's a nice car, but at the same time it has the specs of a hypercar, and that's it. I mean, this is the car that can do that, and pretty much no other. All right, I'm going to give it a little gas here. Holy oh my God. What? It's so insane. That is one of the craziest automotive acceleration feats I have ever It's just instant, and I looked down, I was going twice as fast as I thought going in that span. It's, the thing about the car is, the thing that's so impressive about it is the sheer ability to change speeds at the rate at which it does. So in a lot of places, you get up to the speed I was just going and you're way over the speed limit, you're being very reckless. But the truth is, this car, you can do it in 2 seconds and then you can be back down to a normal, totally legal speed in 2 seconds, and it's really not that big of a deal. I'm astonished at how fast it is, and especially the fact that it just does it with no drama. That's the coolest thing about this car. It's just so well built. It's just so well built. I'm gonna give it one more big push here. Here we go. The sound is unreal. It really is far better with the windows rolled down. The car owner told me you gotta put the windows down because you just hear it, and it's so true. Oh, it's like there's a giant storm outside your window. And by the way, did you notice the window went up as I started to get really fast? That's a feature of this car. It starts to roll up the window so you don't get crazy amount of airflow, and it doesn't slow down your aerodynamics, all that stuff when you get started going really, really fast. The thing I think that makes this car so impressive really is this just unbelievable combination, and no one else can do it, of luxury and performance. It really does feel like a Bentley, and I'll tell you, the Divo, Bugatti says, oh, it's a different car and it's completely separate from the Chiron, blah, blah, blah. It does definitely have some elements that make it more exciting. And on the track, it is certainly faster. There's no question about that. It's been measured. But it still has the stuff you want, which is it's still relatively comfortable, and it's still really nice, and it's still well engineered, it's still very quiet, but you have that incredible performance, and just a little bit better performance than the Chiron. For a long time, the Chiron was the top car on my DOUGSCORE spreadsheet, and it got unseated by the McLaren F1, but really only because of that car's provenance. This is still probably the overall best driving car I've ever been in. And again, with the Divo, it just gets a little bit better in the key ways of driving without sacrificing too much, or really anything at all. I mean, I don't notice any dramatic sacrifices aside from the fact that I am sitting in a manual seat, which I find to be pretty insane given the price point. And so that's the Bugatti Divo. This is one of the most impressive cars on the planet in existence anywhere. I never thought I would have a chance to see a Divo, let alone review it, but well, I just did, and I hope you enjoyed it. Anyway, now it's time to give the Divo a DOUGSCORE. Starting with the weekend categories and styling, the Divo is a striking car, very head-turning but not as beautiful as the Chiron. The revisions to the Divo added better performance, but they removed some of the simplicity of the design, and it gets an 8 out of 10. Acceleration, this is one of the fastest cars in existence. It gets a 10 out of 10. Handling is excellent, although given the weight and size, it's not as sharp as some exotic cars, even with the Divo upgrades over the regular Chiron, and it gets a 9 out of 10. Fun factor is everything. This car is remarkably enjoyable, and it gets a 10 out of 10. Cool factor, of course, same deal. That's an easy one, 10 out of 10 for a total weekend score of 47 out of 50. Next up are the daily categories and features. The Divo has some nice stuff, but it falls short on the latest tech, though that's by design, and it gets a 6 out of 10. Comfort is excellent for a car like this, and it gets a 5 out of 10. Quality is interesting. The interior is amazing, truly fantastic materials and design, but reliability is still a concern given the running costs of this car, and it gets a 7 out of 10. Practicality is low. It has 2 seats, no trunk space, and driving it is a lesson in anxiety, and it gets a 1 out of 10. Finally, value, and these are unbelievably expensive, more than the Chiron, but they're also far more limited than the Chiron, so I suspect values will stay a lot stronger than the Chiron, so it gets a slightly higher score than the Chiron at 7 out of 10 for a total daily score of 26 out of 50. Added up in the DOUGSCORE is 73 out of 100, which places the Divo here. That ties it for number 2 all-time in the DOUGSCORE, second only to the McLaren F1 and tying the standard Chiron for second place ever. They have a very similar score. The Divo picks up a point in value but loses one in styling, otherwise they're identical. The Divo really is one of the greatest cars in existence, combining luxury and performance and almost unbelievable engineering like practically nothing else.